All right. Welcome everyone to our last event of the Women in STEM Breaking Barriers Conference. I wanted to again thank you all for coming today and for the past couple of days if you were able to make it to Thursday and Friday as well. This is our closing speaker, and I have the distinct honor and pleasure to welcome Stephanie Castillo to give our talk today. So I first wanted to just give a little bit of background about Stephanie. She is a PhD candidate in science communication at Vanderbilt University. She is also the founder of Future Doctors, a digital media company that exposes students to diverse careers and professionals in STEM. Her mission is to share the stories of scientists from all intersections of life to young adults who do not typically see themselves represented on screen. Stephanie has 9 years of scientific training, earning her BS and MSc in chemistry, and began to pursue her PhD in chemistry before switching over to science communication. As a graduate student, Stephanie designs and produces science videos centered around identity, representation, and belonging for high school students and college students. Her scientific background, teaching experience, and science filmmaking training as a 2019 Jackson Wild Media Lab Fellow has shaped Stephanie to pave her career in becoming a full-time video producer and science communicator. So please join me in welcoming Stephanie, and again, thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for the lovely introduction. I didn't realize it was going to be read that long, but that was awesome though. Thank you. Thank you for all the 20 friends that we have hanging out with us tonight. I'm so excited. I hope you all have been learning a lot from this conference, and it's great that we have this space just to kind of exchange ideas and just get more exposure to different types of things that we can do with our career. And so today's topic, I essentially just wanted to share with you my journey, how I became a science communicator and video producer. It didn't really happen overnight, and it's a very windy road to get here, but just wanted to share my story to hopefully just give you insight into what it may look like for you or what we can expect as women in STEM. So a little bit about me, aside from that lovely introduction. I claim myself as like a video producer, digital storyteller, mostly a science communicator. I do have a background in science, so I wanted to be a scientist. I'm the first in my family to go to college, so I'm a first-generation student. I'm a Latina in STEM, a wife and daughter, and a rock climber. So these are just kind of like the different aspects of my identity that I like to just bring to the forefront. And essentially what I do now is I make videos as my research, which has been amazing. I mostly focus on representation. I just want to make sure that there is more than just the typical demographic that we see on popular media that we have either on YouTube or in movies. And I'm interested to see if, does representation really matter? If it does matter, at what point in our life is it more impactful? Is it impactful when we're in high school, when we're in middle school? Does it matter in college? I think, there's a lot of, there's so many movies that are out there, a lot of content that we can absorb either through social media or YouTube, but it's kind of hard to figure out, what there's, unless you have people in your life that are telling you what you can be, you're kind of relying on media to kind of explore the different types of things that we can do. So that's what my research focused on. But before I got to become a science communicator, I kind of had a typical, what seems to be a typical STEM pipeline pathway that I followed. Right after high school, I went into community college. I got my general degree, transferred to a four-year university, graduated with my degree in chemistry, and then went straight into graduate school to pursue my PhD in chemistry. And then instead of my PhD in chemistry, I decided to pivot my career, get a master's, and now switch to my PhD in science communication. Although it looks super linear on paper, I have been leading myself blindly to try to figure out what exactly do I want to do with my life? What does that look like? And do I really want to be doing the things that I feel like I'm doing? And so I feel like as a high schooler, we're expected to know what we want to do, what we want to be right out of college. But the only exposure that I had was working in real estate because that's what my mother did, or working in construction, that's what my father did. And both of my siblings were just not school people. So it was just kind of me to figure it out as I go. And again, like, I'm a first generation student. My family immigrated from Venezuela. And so, there's no one to really tell me like what are the steps to go to. They just know that, education is important. Education is going to get me to live a better life than what my parents can provide me, being immigrants from South America. And so I decided right after high school, if I'm going to do the process of elimination, I have, history, math. I took chemistry my sophomore year. And then I have like English. I'm like, out of all those things, I think science is probably the route that I want to go to. But I specifically chose just in general chemistry, just because of the content that I was absorbing. During the time out of high school, going into community college, the movie Contagion came out, which is ironically about a pandemic that hits because Gwyneth Paltrow was her fault. And so I saw the movie and I was just like so mesmerized of having like, there's women as lead scientists in this movie, and they, took it upon themselves. They showed the entire process of how, they first see or witness a person getting infected, kind of playing out like what the pandemic happens, and then having these scientists develop this vaccine. And one of the women scientists, which was leading the research group, injected herself with the vaccine. I'm like, oh my God, that is so cool. That's what I want to do. And so going into community college, I kind of tailored the classes to be around chemistry. And I decided to go to community college first because it's cheaper and allowed me to explore different types of things without having to be so narrow focused on just one degree. So I just kind of took chemistry classes to see if it was something that I liked. And my chemistry professor, who was also a Latina and a Latina woman, that's like the same thing, but she's a Latina, and she was my chemistry professor. And I sucked at chemistry. I like almost bombed all of my tests, but she had so much patience for me and took the time for me to really understand the content, that by the end of the semester, I was doing well in the class and I felt motivated to continue to want to learn this. And then during this time as well, I grew up in Florida. There was like a really, really bad or really popular case that was happening about like some murder. And one of the forensic scientists on the case was a woman in science. And so it was just all these influences that I had around me just kind of set the tone to be like, okay, like science is something that I'm interested in. I'm just going to stick with this and continue to pursue it. So once I finished with my community college, I learned about this opportunity transferring, or my community college has a direct connect to a four-year university. So out of community college, I went to the University of Central Florida, and there's where I learned about research. So when in community college and we're taking science classes, either in high school and community college, they're very like standard labs that we're just doing basic chemistry, basic experiments. But learning about research is like, okay, we get to apply the science that we did in our classrooms to the real world. And this gave me the opportunity to work with a professor at my university to work in his lab and conduct research. So I got to work with lasers and looking at nanomaterials to figure out their optical properties, like how they glow, how they fluoresce. And I got to learn how to communicate that research through poster presentations. And again, since I am a first generation student, I really didn't know how to navigate these things. So I really depended upon TRIO programs is what they're called, but they're research programs geared towards first generation low income and just like if you're considered like underrepresented in STEM, these are programs here that pretty much give you community, they give you support, they provide you opportunities and connections to research facilities, summer research programs, as well as having the potential to get paid to do research while you're doing your undergraduate or college degree. And also they kind of groom you essentially to take that next step if you do decide that research is the thing that you want to do, to pursue a higher graduate degree. And they'll make sure they will kind of like, help grow help you grow and develop those skills in order to make that next jump. And so having the TRIO program that I was a part of was called the McNair Scholars Program, and something to look into if you do decide to go to a university. But that program pretty much gave me the foot in the door to do a summer research experience. And so, the research that I was doing at my university was like more physical chemistry, lasers, and optics. But because I was still inspired by the movie Contagion, I wanted to see is biochemistry or microbiology something that I would be interested in? So I got to do 2 summer research experiences. This is a summer research experience, pretty much is like an internship, a summer internship where for 2 months you go to an out-of-state university, get to conduct research and only focus on the research, and you get paid to do this. So the pay is usually around like $2,000 to $5,000. But this was, this allowed me to really be entrenched in the scientific community, develop my skills as a scientist, as how to communicate the science that I was studying, and kind of get a feel for is research something that I really want to do? And so I got to go to Boulder University, University of Colorado in Boulder, and I got to do biochemistry labs. So I got to I got to look into the proteins that are on the very surface of bacterial cell walls and understand whether or not how the structure of the proteins could potentially, how they, hold on, I have to remember because this is like forever ago now, but how does the assembly of the proteins affect the way that the bacteria is able to resist against antibiotics? So I got to learn about cell culture and, mutate protein DNA and whatnot. But I was doing this and I'm like, I'm not vibing with this. I don't like this. I loved being in a research facility, but I just wasn't excited about the research that I was doing. And biochemistry, I thought I was going to love it because it's what I saw on the movies. But I was like, it was just so hard for me to really enjoy what I was doing. And so that was during the summer of my junior year. And then going from or my sophomore year going into my junior year. And then the summer after my junior year going into my senior year, I did a second summer research opportunity. And that's where I got to go to Vanderbilt University. And that's where I learned about inorganic chemistry and nanomaterials and how can we use these not subatomic, like these very small particles that we can't see with our eyes and how they can harvest energy for energy renewable purposes or energy storage. And for some reason, doing research in the inorganic field just clicked for me. I understood it. I loved it. I was vibing with it. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to study. I see myself working in a research lab. So being a part of the McNair program, it made sense for me that, okay, once I graduate with my degree in chemistry, then I want to continue to pursue my PhD in chemistry because I want to be a research scientist. So, I feel like I'm being prepared or being groomed. I was very narrowed focused because the only thing that I knew was okay, I can either work in a lab as a technician or I can go to get paid to do research and earn my PhD for the potential of having a higher pay or being the lead scientist in a research lab, in an environmental engineering type of facility is what I envisioned myself for. So right after graduating with my degree in chemistry from the University of Central Florida, I made the jump and went straight into graduate school. I only had a summer break. And just, dove right into my graduate program. And I stayed with Vanderbilt University. I applied to about 5 schools because it was expensive to apply to these places. And I applied to schools that had some type of inorganic or material science research. But out of the 5 schools that I got accepted to, Vanderbilt University was the only one that accepted me. And I was fine with that because I already had experience working in the lab during summer. I already knew the campus. I got, firsthand experience of what it's like to work on this institution, in that lab. And so I felt like, it was meant to be, and was happy that I at least got accepted into a program in the first place. And so I continued to do the work in the lab that I was doing during my summer internship. So I was still working with nanomaterials. Again, as a graduate student, I get paid, not again, but as a graduate student, I get paid to conduct my research. So we're in this weird hyphen in the sense of like, we're paid as employees, but we're still considered students. But, with the funding that our lab has, I was able to just focus on the research. And so the work that I was doing as an inorganic chemist, again, was just looking at nanomaterials that fluoresce, that are able, because they're able to transfer or convert the energy that they're getting from the sun and convert it to energy that gives off light, then we can use this type of energy for biological imaging, for just energy storage for batteries. And I got to use expensive equipment such as a transmission electron microscope, which uses electrons to image particles that we can't see using visible light. And I was in love with the science that I was doing. But the reality hit when I realized that my career as a graduate student is completely different than what I experienced in community college and as an undergraduate student, or even in the research that I was doing as for my summer research experiences. Like I just wasn't prepared for it, and I don't think anyone really told me what to really expect. I kind of, I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. I had a huge sense of imposter syndrome. The research that I was doing was so out of my element. And although I had summer experience with it, conducting the same research, it's just so different at the PhD level because, we're conducting our own experiment. We have control. It's usually just me working with the project. Even though I'm in a lab, everyone has their own different project that they're working towards. And, just the expectations that you get from the reaction that you have with the person that you end up working for could come out a little bit different than what you anticipated. And that's what my experience was. Like, I think I had a really pivotal moment that really struck a chord is when I failed my first preliminary exam. And so the way that the PhD is structured is that I have you enter into the program, you get assigned a research project of whoever you're working with. And then we have like these exams that these benchmarks exams that we get in order to be able to pass them and eventually, be considered a doctor or earn your degree at the end. So the first benchmark test we had was just kind of or test us on whether or not we understood that research that we were doing. But again, like the expectation of going into graduate school, I wasn't prepared to just be independent right off the bat. The lab that I was in, the mentor wasn't as hands-on as I anticipated them to be. And I was lost. I really didn't like the research was kind of out of my element. And I felt ashamed for not knowing what to do or that I didn't know the answers to, because this is like an entirely new research that I was conducting. And instead of asking for help, I felt ashamed and I just kind of like floundered and just kind of, moved my way through the graduate program. And it affected me when I had to go into the first exam. I ended up failing that first exam. And I was avoiding having this conversation with my boss because I let them down. I let myself down. I have no idea what I was doing. And having this open, honest conversation with my boss, I was faced with my boss telling me that the way I spoke was more master's material than PhD material. And hearing that, like, just drew a pit in my stomach and just kind of left me in shock. Like, I worked so hard to get to this place to want to pursue a PhD, and it was my ultimate goal. So to admit that I needed help and I was struggling and I was faced with the fact that because I asked for help that I wasn't cut out to be a PhD, like really, really kind of like dropped my confidence down and knocked it down. And I was just like taken aback. Like, what do I do? What do I do in this situation? But not wanting to prove, I wanted to prove my advisor wrong. Like, no, like, I'm here for a reason. This is what I want to do. And this is something that I want to work towards, let me try again, So I tried again, and I passed the second time around. I had a better project that was more aligned with my interests, so I was able to focus more on it. But even after passing the first exam the second time, I was still met with my advisor of just saying, like, you know what, like, let's just see how the master's goes before we decide to go for the PhD. And that's not what I wanted to hear. Again, I came here to graduate school to pursue my PhD, and that's something that I want to keep doing. I'm not going to let this person decide whether I can or can't. And it's because I'm not getting the guidance that I need from this person that I decided that I need to do something. Like, what are my options? Like, I obviously don't feel invested in this lab that I'm in, although I love the science that I'm doing. Like, I don't feel supported, and I feel like I'm drowning. I need guidance. I need help. And so I really had to kind of look inward and be like, okay, is she right? Like, is this something that I can do? Or, is there another way out? I had to find mentors that were outside of my lab. I had to talk to people that were in different departments to hear their experience. I talked to, like, what feels like 50 people of trying to figure out, like, hey, like, this is what I faced. Like, is this normal? Like, am I in the wrong here? Do I not have what it takes? Like, is there another option? And that's where I found out, like, it's okay if your mentor doesn't meet the needs of, doesn't meet your needs. And so, there is the option to switch to a different lab. So I took the risk and I switched to a different lab, still doing inorganic chemistry, but just underneath the mentorship or the advice of, or, a different professor. So I still get to stay within the chemistry department and still work towards my goal. But while all of this is going down, my imposter syndrome is still growing. I don't feel good enough anymore because I was told that. And I'm now in a new lab where I have a better mentor, but I'm not as excited about the research that I was doing. And so this really affected my mental health. And so I needed a creative outlet to kind of get me to feel like that I'm worth something, or just get my spirits up, and also feel like, how can I become passionate again about the science that I was doing? And so I turned to media. I turned to YouTube. I love watching movies. I love watching or consuming so much content, and I consume so much science YouTube. I don't know if that's like, nerdy of me to say, but I spend hours on YouTube watching different types of content, but I do love to watch science content. And as I'm watching science YouTube, I just had this random idea of, like, you know what, like, should I start a YouTube channel? Like, should I be vlogging? Like, can I do something? Can I use this as, like, my creative outlet? And specifically, like, should I make a science YouTube? Because I'm getting a PhD in science. Can I put my skill set to use in the creative outlet that I decided to choose? And so, looking at the different types of science, I realized, like, a lot of the popular science YouTubers that I watch that get millions of views, they're just, they don't look like me. And so that put me down a rabbit hole, and where I realized, like, no, this is a legit thing. Like, there's a publication that came out at the Public Understanding of Science where they explored the gender gap between science YouTube content creators, and of, like, the almost 400 channels that they looked into, only 32 were hosted by women. And even looking further into the study, they didn't even look into the race or ethnicity, or they didn't look into race and ethnicity, or even just, like, sexual orientation. And so I decided to do my own research and kind of find different content creators who are, like, brown and Black people, and realize that maybe there's, like, 40 channels that I kind of found, but they're all very, like, 100 to 1,000 types of views. So it's like, okay, there's a legit lack of representation in this space. And the lack of representation on the media that I was consuming was also reflected in our workforce. You know, the STEM workforce, there is still a gender gap in between the different types of sciences that are out there. And looking into the racial demographics, there is still a discrepancy between Black and Hispanic workers being in science. And so I had the idea of like, okay, can I use YouTube as a way to increase representation, to hopefully want to increase, can it be used as a tool to increase the representation or an inclusion that we need in our workforce? And I, decided like, okay, like, yeah, like this is something I see the gap, I see the problem, and I want to do something to work towards it. And so I decided to start a YouTube channel, and I centered around my core mission, which is to establish, like, a big dream essentially is just to establish some type of media company or create content that will help high school students, young adults, because that's where I feel like I needed that information, to identify potential role models or mentors and career options with science videos that include different types of walks of life, like diversity in the media, because again, we're only seeing one type of person being or creating content centered around science. And so I wanted to change that. So I had this crazy idea. I decided to go through with it. I launched a YouTube channel, made a website. I started going on Instagram, started doing Twitter, started sharing the science with my colleagues who are also considered underrepresented in STEM, started sharing their science and broke it down in my Instagram. I kind of started networking on Twitter just to share my idea, and it eventually started growing. I found joy again in the science that I was doing, and me having this spontaneous idea of creating content, I was able to look for opportunities to help me kind of grow this idea. I looked for opportunities that were either in campus or off campus. I specifically look into any way that they can support a YouTube channel. So I looked the biggest conference that I attended, not the biggest, but the most influential conference that I attended was called ComSciCon, which was a science communication conference. And that's where I learned that the science YouTubers that I watched and I admired, they're considered science communication. So I never heard of science communication until my second year of being a graduate student doing scientific research was the first time I learned about science communication. And I was like, okay, like this clicks, like this is something that I can, continue to investigate, continue to explore and see what comes off of it. And I pitched Future Doctors to the Entrepreneurship Center at my university, and I got accepted into the program. I also pitched Future Doctors to, we had a digital learning studio at my university, and they loved the idea, and they provided me the camera equipment for me to make these videos. And I found myself like, okay, like things were just kind of lining up and opportunities were happening because I had this unique solution, not solution, but this unique idea, and people resonated with the mission that I was wanting to go through. And so I taught myself how to edit videos and make videos using YouTube tutorials, which is super meta. But I took any opportunity that I can to kind of help further grow this idea and, think bigger than just a YouTube channel, to share science, to share diverse scientists and amplify the science that we're doing and the people behind the science that's being done. And so this brought me so much joy. It brought me so much excitement, so much opportunities. I was able to raise like $15,000 to support Future Doctors. I got accepted to conferences to speak at classrooms for the work that I was doing, and continue to make videos featuring the scientists or featuring my friends, and share their science and continue to develop the skill. But again, just a quick reminder, while I'm doing this exploring and developing this science communication idea, this Future Doctors being my brand, I'm still in graduate school. I'm still trying to earn my PhD in chemistry. And that's my main responsibility. The main reason why I'm in grad school in the first place is, again, to earn my PhD. And I kind of faced some challenges. The more that I was putting myself in science communication, the more opportunities that I was doing and receiving and growing and learning this skill, I was suffering in my research. I started to avoid going to lab because I like setting foot in lab just like it just brought so much anxiety and just so much resentment and so much shame. Like I just wasn't excited about the science that I was doing. I no longer wanted, I felt like I wasn't good enough in the research that I was doing. And I was already finding joy in science communication. So I just didn't want to put in the time and the responsibility to do my research. And it led to me failing out of my chemistry PhD program. So, the second exam that we have, the second benchmark that we have, or second exam benchmark that we have in the chemistry PhD program is I have to propose a research experiment and defend that. And defending that proposal allows me to become a PhD candidate, and passing that will grant me the I don't know the word, like grant me the permission to go ahead and, make it to the next tier, which would be to earn my PhD. And I failed out of it. So it led me to kind of like the second defining moment in my career is when the advisor in the new lab that I was working for, expressed to me like, obviously you find a lot of joy in future doctors. Like, do you really need a PhD for that? Like you can, might as well just try to leave with your master's and, and he didn't feel like, or they didn't feel like it was fair enough for me to, continue to be in this PhD program and spend so many years to do it when my heart isn't in it. And, reflecting on that moment now, they had a point. Like I don't need a PhD to do science communication. Many of the successful science communicators that are out there usually stop at their bachelor's or their master's. But I'm stubborn, and I came in and I wanted the PhD, but I just found that like the environment that I was in was not supportive of me, and I didn't feel like I was being invested in or in a place where I can thrive. And so I was kind of faced with the option of like, okay, I already have my master's from like switching labs, and I don't want to leave the PhD program because being a PhD student, to be very frank with you, granted me a lot of privileges and a lot of opportunities that I feel like I would have lost or not been able to have if I wasn't a PhD student. And so I wasn't ready or willing to kind of like drop out of my PhD program and kind of give up this privilege that I've gained. And so after crying for like 3 days after failing, I decided, okay, like I had to gather myself together again. Like, what are the steps that I need to take? Who are some people that I can talk to? Let me revisit the mentors that I've established as I look at my network, look at the people that have supported me and seek their opinions. And a lot of my mentors or those in my community, they're like, Stephanie, like you're capable of doing your PhD. Like, don't give up, just try, like retake your exam. Like we'll help you, we'll get you through there. And even though I knew that was an option to retake my exam, like I just had a gut feeling like I don't want to do this. I'm not happy where I'm at. My mental health was suffering. And like, I didn't think it was worth pursuing my PhD, at least in that department, at the cost of my mental health. And so I kept talking to more people to find different opportunities or find different options. And then maybe the last conversation that I had that the day that I was like seeking help was the dean of the graduate school. And I was able to meet with the dean of the graduate school. I told him everything that I went through, how I wasn't happy or I didn't get the guidance that I needed in the first lab. I had to switch to lab. After switching the lab, I still didn't feel like I was in a place that was supportive of me, but I didn't want to, leave the university. I still wanted to pursue it, still earn a PhD because I felt like it was instrumental to my career decision and what I want to do. And as being a woman of color in this space, having the degree, having the PhD behind my name would grant me more access to places that I don't think that I would have if I were to just to leave with my master's. And so, I was really thankful the dean heard my frustrations and understood. And he told me that, like, the university is all about making sure that the students that come into their, that step foot onto the campus are leaving with the education that they need and that they're seeking out. And so he proposed to me that there's an internal interdisciplinary PhD program on my campus. And if I'm able to find a new advisor, come up with my own committee, and to come up with my own source of funding, then I can essentially be a part of this interdisciplinary PhD program and continue on to earn this degree. And so I was like, okay, I liked the sound of it. This is my option C that no one else really knew. And I was going to do whatever it takes, or whatever it took, to kind of get to this position. And so I officially told the chemistry department that I was no longer going to pursue or stay in chemistry, and was willing to take the risk and take a leap of faith to be like, okay, like, this interdisciplinary is my way out, is the way that I can continue to earn the degree that I came here for. And essentially, I wanted to convert future doctors, which I have so much, I've grew so much, and I have put so much energy into developing this idea. And I wanted to essentially make future doctors my PhD project. And so I spent the entire summer, so like the whole 2 months, trying to talk to different faculty members around campus to see if they were willing to accept me, to understand, like, be willing to take a risk on me, to take me into their lab. And I was able to get the director of the communication department and he agreed to be my advisor. I was able to, so the director of the science communication department became my advisor. And I was able to bring together a team, or a committee of an interdisciplinary committee, where I have a committee member from the education department on my campus who specifically researches STEM education. Then I have someone from the digital humanities on my committee, someone from the cinema media arts, and I was still able to keep the credit, the 4 years of experience and credit that I had in the chemistry PhD program. And my second advisor became one of my committee members. And so I was able to, I don't know if cheat the system away, but like, I was able to work the system in a way that I am being invested in, that I am doing what I want, like I love, and I have the privilege and the opportunity to pitch to them my idea of doing future doctors, studying representation in media and the effects it may have on young adults. And they were all on board, and I was able, or because I still have because I had the 4 years experience of being in the chemistry program, they were like so nice enough, or generous enough in a sense, to allow me to continue to be a teaching assistant. So that was my source of funding. That was my source of income. So I found my funding, I found my advisor, and I found my committee, and I was able to come up and propose a science communication and chemistry PhD program where I get to study future doctors as my main dissertation and get to continue to do the things that I love, which is to make videos about science, collaborate with other STEM influencers in a way to create conferences. I've hosted a bunch of science communication workshops. I got accepted into a science filmmaking workshop where I learned to actually produce short documentary films. I get to, do talks and create podcasts. And I'm doing all the things that I love, that brought me so much joy, that brought me closer to doing science. And now I get to do it as a full-time PhD student. And it's been super amazing. And I think just to kind of like wrap up my science communication journey, like when I take a step back and kind of reflect on like where I started and where I am now, I feel like there's kind of three arcs, or three pivots, or not pivots. Yeah. Three arcs that I kind of centered my science or my STEM journey around, which is exploring, experimenting, and evolving. And so I never really, like, I had a general idea of what I wanted to do, which was to do science, to do chemistry, but not me being curious and wanting to explore different ways that I can pursue this allowed me to experiment with different types of research labs, with different types of careers and different types of opportunities to continue to evolve as a person, to evolve and really identify, like, what is it that I want to do? How am I going to get there? Who are the people that I can connect with to get me to these places? And, you know, where do I feel happy? Where do I feel like I belong? And so I just kind of want to leave that with you, with you all. Like, we don't have everything figured out. I'm still just taking opportunities as they come and using and exploring and experimenting and just seeing where it takes me, as long as it brings me back to my main mission, my main goal of getting the degree, being able to communicate science and being able to change the face of who does science. Like, as long as they bring back to my core values of what I want to do, I'm willing to kind of change or pivot my career in order to meet that. So yeah, I hope this can be like used as an encouragement for you all, just to experiment with different types of opportunities. You know, it's okay not to know, and that's a good thing, because it doesn't limit you to what you want to do. And find people that are on your corner that are going to support you, and don't let other people tell you what you can and can't do. But I rambled on for like a good 40 minutes now. So I'll check the chat to see if any of you all have questions. But I hope you enjoyed. Oh, Emma, this is awesome. Science can seem intimidating at first, but it helps more when someone who looks like you and understands your learning style is teaching. Yeah, I think yeah, Maggie, thanks. You're in part of TRIO programs too. Yeah, TRIO programs was like the only way that I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for being a part of a TRIO program, honestly.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. That was an amazing talk. You are an incredibly inspiring person. Journey and creating your own thing is just amazing. So thank you. Just wanted to thank you again for being here. We just got another comment. You ramble very well. Thank you for the inspirational story. Yes, so thank you so very much. And for everyone who is watching, if you have any questions for Stephanie, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A portion. Yeah, or thank you, Sarah, or under the Q&A tab. And we'll go through those if anyone has any questions. I did have just kind of a general question. So as a person in science, and do you have any I'm sure you have many pieces of advice, but what it would be like a main piece of advice for those wanting to share their type of science with other people?
Yeah. So, I guess the main tip that I can give is create things that you like to consume. So in my case, I love consuming media. I love consuming videos, specifically movies and videos. And so that was the medium that I wanted to choose. So if you are great at writing, you love writing, creative writing, writing will be a good source for you. If you like to do art, science communication through art is something so needed and so specific, and a platform that you all can use, either creating your own blog or using Instagram to create short stories as a way to share the science that you're doing. What other, if you like to be around people, like if you love teaching as an aspect, being a part of volunteer programs or outreach programs where you get to visit classrooms to do science, that is probably like the first step that I learned into how to do science communication, was able to share the science that I was doing to like elementary students. And that really kind of gave me the bug of like the importance of outreach, the importance of sharing the science that we're doing in the lab and being able to communicate it to people that are not in our bubble. So whatever you like to do that you personally, or the skills that you personally have, try to find mediums or outlets that align with those things. And don't limit yourself just because you saw a popular person do it, like just explore and experiment to see like what fits and what doesn't.
Thank you so much. And we have actually another question in the chat. This was honestly incredible. I guess this conference was created with some of the same ideals that Future Doctors has. Do you have any recommendations on expanding your reach?
So in terms of like, I guess as Maggie part of like the group, the organization?
These are conference organizer, actually.
Okay. Yeah. So like off or backstage, Hannah was sharing that you guys only reached, or the only reach you have was like within your own within your own grad students, because you are graduate students yourselves. Like the way that I was able to expand my reach was collaborating with, at least the university that I'm on has an outreach center, or they have a specific education department that have already roots in the local high schools that are around. And so, collaborating with people that are not specifically in STEM, but do stuff like STEM adjacent or education adjacent is a way that you have to build those relationships. So you have kind of like a little network or a little bridge where you can, solicit or advertise the work that you're doing. But it does take a lot of, cold emails pitching of being like, hey, like I saw that you're a science teacher at this local school. I'm part of this university. This is our initiative. Like, here's if this is free for your students, like we would love for your students to attend to explore these things. It's all about building relationships and networks outside of our little academic grad school bubble. But it does take time to build those relationships. So that's kind of like the main way I've been expanding is, being transparent about my mission and collaborating with people that are teachers or are professionals in these organizations. Because whenever they think of something like, oh, hey, like Stephanie does these things, like, can you come speak to our classroom? Or like, if you have a conference, please send it our way. So start building them now. If you guys are wanting to do this next year, start having those relationships with teachers that are around either of your institutions.
So we got a couple of questions in the Q&A as well. So the first one that came in was, how did you get into rock climbing and what's your favorite type?
Yeah, so so moving from Florida to Tennessee, where I'm pursuing my PhD, I was like the person that's always at the beach. And then I'm like, okay, now I'm landlocked. So what am I doing for physical activity? So I found there was like a rock climbing gym nearby, and needing to talk to people that weren't doing science, I tried out the rock climbing gym and fell in love with it. So I think it wasn't until like a year into moving to Tennessee for my PhD is where I learned about rock climbing, and it became just like an avid thing that I love doing.
Awesome, thank you. And another question. So as a high schooler, is there ever a time that's too early to start doing something like this?
No, I think the earlier the better. If you have, I think at this moment you're probably on social media. Science TikTok is kind of like the new rave at the moment. But the way that you can start in science communication is if you're able to teach something, teach a scientific concept to somebody else. Not only are you further understanding you're further understanding your own understanding, or you're further expanding your understanding of the content. But if you're able to communicate that to someone that's not in your direct bubble or learning the same thing as you, that is a great practice for you to do. So start experimenting with any type of social media or platforms that you like doing. So again, like TikTok is really great because you have, it's a challenge in the sense that you have to try to share your science within 30 to 60 seconds. If you want just a still image or want to share your art through social media, Instagram is a great platform because we have captions for it, or it's more like static imaging. So just start experimenting with maybe the any of the science classes that you're taking now that you enjoy. Try to find a way to make it really like if you read it, like how would you bring your excitement or your enthusiasm and use whatever platform that you're using as a way to transfer that enthusiasm to get people interested in the things that interest you. But you have to be interested about it first, or else it reads off very stale and boring. So you have to be able to like whatever science you're communicating and using whatever platform that you feel more comfortable with or you want to enjoy and experiment with as a way to test out the grounds. Yeah. And if you have the privilege of like doing any like science conferences or science programs, like do them. I wish I knew about all of that. I feel like I was very late in the game, being the first person in my family to kind of pursue higher education.
Awesome. Great. So I have another question. So you mentioned the conference SciComm. Is that like the only kind of science communication type of conference, or are there more than just that, or is that just kind of like the main one?
So CompSciCon is the main, not the main one, but I think it's a really good one for graduate students. That one's, specifically for graduate students, made by grad students. It's a 2-day workshop where you learn how to do popular science writing. They have panels. They also, at least the one that I did, we did like some type of improv or learn some type of skill such as data visualization. But it's an intense 2-day workshop where you kind of just learn the general scope of what science communication is, and it's free. You just have to apply and get accepted into these programs. There's also other conferences that have popped up. There's one called SciTalk, which is mostly for, again, for students can go, like, college students and undergraduate students can go there, but it's more for like early, you can network with early career professionals or very established science communicators. So that's a good networking conference to go to. They also have a bunch of panels and talks centered around how to be a better science communicator, or what does the landscape look like. What's another one? There is SciTalk. Man, I feel like there's one more that I'm not. Reclaiming STEM is one that like my friend established, and is mostly for kind of like people that are underrepresented, but they do anywhere from science communication to different types of tracks. But that's a one that it's open to college students and undergraduate students, just to kind of go into science policy, science communication, and other types of STEM professional development types of things. Those are the only ones that I can think of off my head. Oh, and the one that was like so pivotal to my career was the Jackson Wild Media Lab Fellowship. And it's mostly centered around science filmmaking. And that's a 10-day workshop where you learn how to produce short form documentaries. You get to go to, where did I go? I go to Wyoming. And I got to network with people that were in the conservation science filmmaking space. And that was very, like, it opened my eyes to like, oh, like, this can be a legit career. But that's kind of like a more competitive conference or workshop to be a part of. But those are the ones that I can think of on the top of my head.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely be looking into a few of those for sure. We got another question. So what advice do you have for someone interested in science writing / education?
Yeah, so I think, okay, for science education, can they elaborate? Like, science education can look so different. Again, it can be some type of outreach where you can go to classrooms to do some type of demo to share it or to actually teach science. There's also, working in a museum is a form of like science education. And like you can volunteering in science museums, volunteering in science classrooms in like elementary and high school to share demonstrations. If you're interested in what else for education, see if there's any like established after school programs or volunteer after school kind of programs through. Did they mention if they're a high schooler or not? I don't know. But if you're at college, see if there's kind of like a science club that is affiliated or linked to some type of after school program centered around science. If you're in high school, I don't know for science education. For science writing, depending on what stage you on, there is this one, oh man, what's it called? It's called like Axios or something like that. But I have to think about it later. But there are platforms where like you can pitch people's stories of what you've written, and it can be as a small little blurb of like the science that you're communicating. Or if you are an undergraduate student or a graduate student that's asking me this question, you can kind of, write about the research that you're doing. And if you email them the story, it's a good way to practice kind of like publishing your stuff for the public audience. But if you're just talking about science writing in general, again, try to consume the things that you like reading. Like if you like more news type story, look up like nature journals or the science magazine or the CEN, I think it's what it's called. I don't know, chemical engineering. I don't know, like different types of science magazines that are out there. Look at the different types of news story that they write about or how they report science, and try to mimic their style, just to kind of get a general sense of like, how technical do you have to get? How do you simplify the science that you're writing? If you don't want to write so serious in terms of science news, try to find popular science writing such as, Massive Sci is a great place to look. I'll write it in the chat. Massive Sci, like look them up on like Instagram and Twitter. Those are a bunch of graduate students and college students who are practicing writing their science in an engaging way. So look at different types of mediums, different types of websites, different types of styles, and see which one you like the most, and then try to write a story similar to like the structure that they have. I think that's the only thing that I can think of.
Awesome. Yeah. And a couple of other people put some different opportunities in the chat as well that they had heard of. So thank you, chat members, for contributing as well. So it looks like we have about 2 minutes left. So if anyone has any last questions for Stephanie, we can probably take one more, maybe squeeze that in. But yeah, give it a couple of seconds.
I've been doing, I'm just going to like self-promote really quick. So on my website, futuredoctors.com, I've been doing Clubhouse sessions, but if people that don't have Clubhouse, I've been recording them and publishing on my website underneath like the podcast tab that I have. But there I'm talking to early career professionals and or early career science communicators, and also those that are more mid-career and established, and recording our conversations to kind of talk about how we can get into science communication, how we can further develop our skills, what type of SciComm path should we look into. So I've been doing these weekly. So that's a good source if you like listening to podcasts as just to kind of explore what it means to be a professional science communicator, if that's something that interests you. So that's on my website. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes, getting some thank yous in the chat. And yeah, thank you again so much for agreeing to be here with us on this last day and for closing out our conference. This was a wonderful way to end this our first Women in STEM Breaking Barriers conference, and we will be back again next year. But thank you so much for giving us some of your time on a Saturday to come in and speak. Yeah, getting some more thank yous in the chat. But yeah, and then to everyone who joined us today, thank you all so much for coming and for being here. And I hope you got something out of this conference, that you took away some helpful, useful information, met some cool people, and we just wanted to thank you once again. Yeah, so that's it for me.
Thank you for having me. This was an honor. And
oh, yeah. Absolutely. It was so very glad that you said yes when we reached out. Yeah. I don't know if Maggie, if you wanted to say anything to kind of close this out.
Awkward. I started talking and my audio wasn't shared yet, or my talking to a blank screen. Yes, honestly, knows I'm such a big fan. I have followed you on Instagram for like a year and a half or so. It's like one of my favorite Instagram accounts. So highly recommend you all check it out. But just really thank you for coming and closing us out. This was such a great way to end. And I honestly think, especially talking to the younger students, students that are in the audience and everything, this was definitely, I feel like, the motivation and inspiration that they need, especially going in and starting college in the fall, or like looking to apply, or whatever their next steps are, whether it is college or not. So we're just so appreciative. And to everyone who's still in the audience with us, we are so appreciative that you were with us these last 3 days. We know that this was our first time doing it, so we thank you for trusting us and hanging out with us the last 3 days to learn a lot of different things that I feel like we honestly, like, I learned so much that I feel like I have to sit down and reevaluate my life this weekend. So just appreciative to all of you. Appreciative, Stephanie, that you came and spent your Saturday night with us. But we will be sticking around if anybody wants. We will be heading over to the fireside chats. So if you guys do want to hang out with us, talk to us, have anything to say, we will be there to listen to you, and are more than happy to hang out with you until the platform kicks us out. So we'll be around. Yeah.
You guys are doing a great job. Thank you so much for having me once again, and best of luck.
Thank you so much. I'm going to stop broadcasting here, everybody. So the screen is going to go black.